Chapter 201. The Audience Chamber 2. Christina's outspread wings covered the door and the walls of the audience chamber. Forgetting to even regenerate his severed hand, Aereus stared at Christina with wide eyes. An angel's wings were a symbol of their rank. According to what was recorded in the scriptures of light, when the incarnation of light, the Son of Heaven, descended to this world, the angel whom the Son of Heaven called upon the most and showed the most favor to possessed 6 wings. Eurus had always been obsessed with reproducing such a miraculous appearance. However, divine magic was only capable of growing a pair of wings. Depending on their strong faith and divine power, a user of divine magic could make their wings bigger and brighter. But no matter how much they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to increase the number of wings they could grow. Several attempts had been made to artificially increase the number of wings, but they hadn't worked out. While attaching a few more wings to a Pegasus, which possessed a pair of wings from birth, was a simple task that couldn't really be considered a miracle, it wasn't so easy to artificially attach a pair of wings to a human who had been born without wings. In fact, if they could be satisfied with ordinary wings, it was actually possible to implant dozens of wings on a person's back instead of just 6. However, they didn't want just plain and ordinary wings. What they wanted were wings of light. Wings that had been made from the light. Wings whose very act of being unfurled would seem miraculous. Even the Pope and the cardinals who had artificially implanted themselves with their stigmata could only grow 2 wings of light. That was why the 3 couldn't take their eyes off Christina. Just by looking at those 8 shining wings, they could tell that these wings hadn't been artificially created. Those wings were unmistakably a symbol of divine majesty that had to have been bestowed by a miracle. Although the 3 of them could have also spread their own pairs of large and shining wings, even if they all spread their wings simultaneously, it seemed like they wouldn't be able to overwhelm the light emitted by those 8 wings. Even though the light coming from Christina's wings was shining so brightly, they weren't being blinded even as they looked right at it. Instead, this light kindly caressed and passed through their eyes, stirring their souls. Ah! Cardinal Bashara let out a quiet exhalation and closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his cheek. However, Cardinal Pietro, who stood beside him, didn't shed any tears. Instead, he glared at Christina with his eyes bulging in disbelief. At the same time, he balled up his fists inside his sleeves. Raphael, who was still holding his greatsword to their necks, noticed Pietro's eyes. The emotion that was slowly bubbling up within the cardinal's gaze was neither awe nor worship. As such, Raphael didn't hesitate. The blade was pushed forward and decapitated Pietro's head from his neck like a guillotine. Pietro himself could never have imagined that he would ever be beheaded like this. He was someone who bore the mark of the stigmata on his forearm, one of the 3 cardinals of the Holy Empire. Raphael didn't care about any of that. Even though Pietro had been presented with a miracle that should have forced him to acknowledge the truth of his mistakes, he had refused to do so. Thus, Raphael had to punish him. Pietro had his head cut off before he could even call upon the light. As Pietro's head rolled down the blade of his sword, Raphael grabbed it by the hair. Push. The blood that gushed out of Pietro's body after some delay stained the walls and ceiling of the audience chamber red. Ah! Bashara, who had been standing right beside the 2, gulped as blood spattered onto his cheek. He turned to look at what was happening next to him in bewilderment. Pietro's body, which had had its head cut off, was left staggering forward. Bashara wasn't the only one who had been flustered by this. Both Christina and Eugene were taken aback by the sudden violence. Pope Aereus' jaw gaped soundlessly in shock. Only Raphael was left, lifting Pietro's head with a calm look on his face. Why did you kill him? Eugene was so dumbfounded that he stuttered his question. In response to this, Raphael shook Pietro's head from side to side and said, "He won't die from just this." Eugene shook his head. "No, that's absurd. You've beheaded him, so how can he not die? Even someone as strong as Cardinal Rogerus would have died if he was beheaded." "Pietro is the Chancellor of the Department of Divine Magic," Raphael explained. "He's different from Sergio, a combat monk from the Inquisition. Isn't that right?" Bam! The head swinging from Raphael's hand was swung against the wall. At this impact, Pietro's head opened its mouth and screamed, "Arg!" Such a sight made Eugene feel dizzy for a few moments. Although he knew that there were a few high-ranking demon folk who wouldn't die even after being decapitated, He had never seen a human who could survive having his head cut off. Araf Raphael. You, how dare you? Pietro cried as blood spattered from his lips. Perhaps because his throat had been cut completely open, his voice had a breathy, hissing sound to it. Quickly reattach my neck to my body, Pietro demanded. Raphael idly commented, even you will probably die if you stay like this for about 5 minutes, right? Pietro glared, you dare. Although I predicted this, actually seeing you like this in reality is extremely disturbing and disgusting. Could this really be called a miracle? It looks more like evil black magic to me, Raphael muttered. Pietro growled, Grarg. I've wanted to try and slit your throat for a while now. There's no need for you to feel so victimized, Pietro. After all, among the newly enlisted recruits into the church soldiers, I know that you've been enticing a few poor young chicks who've lost their parents and are in need of money to conduct various experiments on them. What do you know? Don't act like you're so righteous. All of that is for the sake of developing new miracles. I didn't slice your head off just to argue with you, Raphael said as he threw Pietro's head back behind him. The head crashed into a wall and fell to the ground before rolling around. Garg! Pietro screamed. Thanks to Raphael having suddenly cut the head off of one of the cardinals, Eugene was feeling extremely off balance. Glancing back to the person in front of him, Eugene's eyes met with Aeurius, whose neck was still sandwiched between the moonlight sword and the holy sword. Eugene Lionheart, are you going to kill me? Aeurius eventually demanded. Eugene just warned him, shouldn't you add a sir to that? Ha! Aeurius's eyes shook in disbelief. Eugene continued asking, don't you understand your situation? Could it be that you won't die right away either if your head gets chopped off like his? Aeurius stoically remained silent. Listen closely, I am the hero chosen by the Holy Sword, and according to your doctrine, that means I am the incarnation of the light. Isn't that right? Meanwhile, isn't the Pope just an agent of the light? Surely the incarnation must be closer to God than the agent, no? That's... What? Are you going to spout bullshit and claim that I've fallen like Sergio did? Eugene said with a sneer. Aeurius didn't say a word in response to this and just stared at Eugene. After a few moments he let out a long sigh and nodded. I understand, Aeurius conceded. But please restrain your anger and allow us to treat Pietro's head. Eugene raised a brow. And why should I do that? Sir Eugene, you may not be aware, but Pietro has done many things for the light over the past few decades, Aeurius tried to argue. And I guess that one of the results is that he doesn't die right away even if his head is cut off? Eugene asked sarcastically. That is the result of repeatedly performing experimental miracles on his own body. Lord Raphael may have accused Pietro of harming the young recruits, but that was all to strengthen the church soldiers. And why does the Holy Empire of Eurus require a strong army, and where does it put them to use? Isn't it all to keep Helmuth in check? I also didn't come here to listen to shit like that. The holy sword began to emit light. Aeurius' eyes narrowed as he looked down at the light streaming through the sword held beside his neck. Then please let us talk, Sir Eugene, Aeurius politely requested. Before Eugene could even respond to these words, Pietro's head, which had rolled into a corner, cried out, Talk? Your Holiness, just what kind of talk can you have with these vile and vicious fallen ones? Pietro just couldn't maintain his composure. It had already been over a minute since his head had been chopped off. Even with the stigmata implanted on him, he would surely die if his head was cut off and wasn't reattached within 5 minutes. Pietro couldn't help but feel anxious and enraged at the thought that he had only a few minutes left to live. Pietro demanded, You need to call the paladins and the church soul. If I offer his head, would you be willing to talk to me? Aeurius calmly asked as his eyes gestured towards Pietro. At these words, Pietro's head, which had already paled from the loss of so much blood, twisted into a grimace. Aeurius apologized. I'm sorry, Pietro. However, I don't want my name to go down in history like this. Pietro stammered. What do you mean? We might be able to overcome this dangerous situation. However, do you think it will be possible to resolve this crisis without any fuss? No matter what, an uproar will occur, then the paladins and the church soldiers will flock over. Aeurius let out a long sigh and closed his eyes. How exactly am I supposed to explain this situation to them? Do I tell them that Eugene Lionheart, the incarnation of light, has rebelled and that the ever-loyal crusader Lord Raphael has joined in his rebellion? How am I meant to explain the wings growing from the back of Saint Candidate Christina? Tivats. I've thought it over several times, but it wouldn't benefit the church to overcome or even show any resistance in this situation. But no matter what. Are you really going to sacrifice me when we've been leading this church together for decades now? Pietro roared in disbelief. Furious sighed. Stifle your anger, Pietro. After all, wasn't it due to your own undoing that you were beheaded? Eugene, listening to the conversation, let out a snort. As expected of Pope Aerius. He was definitely a zealot like the rest, but as befitting someone who has led the Church of Light for the past few decades, he had a cunning side. Eugene spoke up. If it's just a conversation, then of course, I'm willing to participate as long as you desire. And what should we do about Pietro's head? Aerius asked cautiously. I'm not the one who chopped it off, so why are you asking me? Eugene said with a shrug and a sly smirk. Now that things had played out like this, it wouldn't mean much to the overall situation to subtract a life or two, but Eugene didn't want to unnecessarily shoulder the responsibility for doing so. Though Eugene wasn't sure if Raphael understood his intentions. What was clear was that Raphael didn't like Pietro. The divine magic developed by the Department of Divine Magic, which Pietro led, often demanded prices that weren't worth the miracle, most of which involved the destruction of the body. The Knights of the Blood Cross, led by Raphael, didn't need to rely on such dubious and crude miracles, but there was an overabundance of paladins in Eurus. Among these other paladins, there were a few newly appointed Knights of the Faith who would knock on the door of the Department of Divine Magic, hoping for a stronger and more brilliant light. Hold on, Pietro cried out. Light erupted from Raphael's greatsword. Bashara, watching this happen right before him, sighed and made the sign of the cross. The slash made no sound. Raphael's greatsword moved at an unbelievable speed for its size and cut down Pietro's body. Swoosh. The following stream of slashes rained down on Pietro's head. Like the last time, Pietro couldn't even let out a scream. A bright light engulfed Pietro's head, and amid this light his head was scattered into dust. Such light, Bashara muttered. To think that the light emitted by a sword that kills a cardinal would be so unbelievably clear. I know, right? Raphael agreed with a laugh as he withdrew his greatsword's light. Aerius questioned Eugene. What did you do at the Fount of Light? I just saved a woman who was bleeding profusely, Eugene confessed. Are you saying you killed so many believers just to save the Saint Candidate? Aerius asked in disbelief. I didn't save her because she's the Saint Candidate, Eugene denied. Then why? Because I received a revelation. It wasn't a lie. Eugene really had received guidance from the Holy Sword to break through the restrictions surrounding the temples. At the source of the spring, he had even seen the saints who had given themselves to the fount starting from long ago. Since I was shown such a revelation, I couldn't just stay still, Eugene declared. A revelation, you say? Aerius chuckled and nodded. Before Aerius had even realized it, the two swords that had been touching his neck were already withdrawn. Aerius picked up his right hand that had fallen onto the table and stuck it back onto the stump of his severed hand. Gib. Aerius's flesh proceeded to merge with each other. Did the revelation instruct you to destroy the fount? Aerius asked. Nope, Eugene admitted. So, Sir Eugene, that means it was your decision to destroy the fount, Aerius concluded. Eugene nodded. That's right. The fact that the Holy Sword can emit such brilliant light in your hand, in the end, doesn't that mean the light was enraged by the ritual being performed at the fount? Aerius asked doubtfully. I don't know about the light, but I was infuriated, Eugene replied. Sir Eugene, Aerius raised his hand to grab the three-layered crown above his head, slowly lifted it off and set it down in front of him. Are our beliefs wrong? This question wasn't one that could be answered lightly. Eugene stared at the Pope of Eurus in front of him. Although only a single pope was currently standing before him, the entire history of the Holy Empire could be seen within the light flickering in his eyes. So Eugene decided to answer honestly, how should I know? He hadn't come here with a grandiose intention to argue about the right and wrong of their faith. What Eugene wanted in the end was just for nothing at all to have happened. For all the things he had done in Eurus to not become a problem and weigh him down like a ball tied to his ankle. so that the troublesome and grandiose accomplishment of turning the whole of Eurus into his enemy didn't happen. If you want to hear about whether your beliefs are right or wrong, ask her, Eugene said as he turned his head and looked down. His eyes met with Christina, whose 8 wings were still outspread. Christina Rogerus. The voice in her head spoke to her. The intention wasn't to give her a push to the back. Christina was well aware of what she should do in this situation. She didn't need to muster up any great determination to do it. Christina herself knew that she deserved to do this. Light scattered from her like falling feathers as Christina spread her wings and flew up to stand right in front of Aeurius. Aya. Bashara closed his eyes and raised a prayer at her holy appearance. Aeurius calmed his trembling breath and blinked his eyes once before speaking. Saint Candidate Christina. No, it's no longer appropriate to call you the. Before his words were even finished, Christina's right hand slapped Aeurius in the ear. Pray. An unbelievably heavy sound of a slap echoed through the audience chamber. Let's start with getting this blow in, Christina's lips parted. I have discovered what I am. I know what the saints who came before me were like and what became of them when they died. I know the truth of that false name you gave to the fount of light. However, it's true that you have grown wings, Aeurius tried to argue. Yes, that's right, Christina conceded. But these wings weren't grown by me through the miracles and rituals designed by you. These wings are not the products of the false miracles you all have been seeking. If that's the case, then does that mean everything we've done has been meaningless? Aeurius asked. Is our faith, no, the faith of all the popes and cardinals who have existed in the past, wrong? There are those, Christina began hesitantly, who have been saved by this country you have nurtured and by the light and faith you have untiringly promoted. Christina recalled a few of her long-distant memories. Before she had even become the adopted daughter of Sergio Rogerus. She remembered living in a secluded and peaceful rural monastery. While she may have been under watch even then, Christina had no awareness of this in her childhood. All of the children who had been raised in the monastery were from similar circumstances. They were children who had been abandoned by their parents. All from ordinary backgrounds, children who didn't know anything about their families. The monasteries of the Church of Light regularly took in such orphans. Christina didn't have any clue whether the orphans raised by the monastery had grown up in the right way and eventually found their own happiness. However, at that time, when Christina thought of her life in the monastery, she had felt that the salvation of the light had come to save her abandoned self. But there are also those who have been hurt by your obsessions, Christina concluded. Aeurius pleaded, is it wrong to yearn for the light? No, that isn't wrong. However, you went beyond even yearning for the light and wanted to own a light created by your own hands. You all were meant to serve the God of light, but instead intruded on his domain, Christina condemned. Ha ha ha. Aeurius laughed and shook his head. If you really know everything and have indeed received a real miracle that has given you the ability to spread those wings, then please answer this question. A long, long time ago, when the incarnation of the light, the Son of Heaven, descended onto this land, then died and left once more, leaving behind the holy sword Altair. Yes, that's all true, Christina nodded impatiently. However, after the Son of Heaven left us, none of the believers of the light could hold the holy sword. And that wasn't the end, was it? Even though the believers so fervently longed for the light that had returned to the heavens up above never returned. He didn't even send down a new apostle to take his place, Aeurius said bitterly, his face no longer calm. With passionate eyes, he stared at Christina and continued speaking. That was why our predecessors decided to bring the light back themselves. Is that really such a mistake? The light? Christina paused as she looked through Anissa's memories. Now Christina no longer had any doubts about the existence of the God of Light. Christina continued, no matter what kind of ugly deeds they committed, the light was always there for them, bestowing its blessings. They had tried to artificially create a saint, cloned her, and then used her remains as a holy relic to create the fount of light. At that time the church felt they had no choice but to do so. The current era might be peaceful, but even going back just 300 years ago, the world had entered an era of war led by the demon kings. In previous eras, wars were even more frequent as nations collided with each other, and even faiths were contested. In such an era, the saint created to serve as a divine weapon managed to perform admirably. In the battlefields where the saint could participate, the damage to her allies was overwhelmingly lesser. In return, the saint's life was short-lived, but she was able to save the lives of countless soldiers in return. The crimes that successive popes and cardinals have committed, the light had no choice but to sorrowfully accept their deeds, Christina revealed. If the existence of the saint was truly a mistake, if Eurus who had created and made use of the saint was wrong to do so, then surely shouldn't the light have left them immediately? Christina explained, the reason that the light didn't return to this world is that he already dwells within the hearts of the believers who serve him, and he shines down upon them from the heavens up above. Arius remained silent. The merciful light can accept the entire sordid past of this country. However, this does not absolve your transgressions. The light knows how easily zealotry can destroy someone. That is why they do not allow a citizen of this country to lift the holy sword. How could that be? You should recall the entire history of this country and what all of you have done to propagandize your faith. For example, the stigmata has been passed down through successive generations of popes and cardinals. For that alone, the popes and cardinals have been considered special, and many people became followers of the light because they were fascinated by the symbol of the stigmata, Christina pointed out. Arius hesitated. That was to revitalize the church. Christina agreed. Yes, they did manage to revitalize the church with their self-drawn stigmata and self-made saint. That is how Eurus has been able to reign as a holy empire for so long. However, the light will no longer overlook your transgressions. The light does not want the holy sword, which was forged personally from their own flesh and blood, to be used as a symbol for zealous proselytization. Ha ha ha. Arius let out a dejected laugh and lowered his head. So if that is why we were not able to carry the holy sword, then why was the great Vermouth able to hold the holy sword? Why is his descendant, Eugene Lionheart, currently holding the holy sword? Because the era needed a hero, Christina replied in an unwavering voice. The light wanted the holy sword to be used purely to save the world, not to act as a symbol that would lead the era into an age of zealotry. Therefore, a person with the qualifications to do so could pull out the holy sword and become the hero. Saint Christina, are you saying that Eugene Lionheart, who isn't even from Eurus, is the hero who will save this world? Arius asked doubtfully. Christina denied this. I am not the one who chose him to be the hero. The god of light personally chose Sir Eugene Lionheart. Arius was struck silent. I was born as a saint and made into a saint. But to me, the life of a saint has never felt like salvation, Christina admitted as she turned her head to look at Eugene. Sir Eugene is the one who saved me when I needed it. He looked at me not as a saint but as a person and reached his hand out to me. Pope Arius, have you ever thought about saving any of the saint candidates? There was no way that could be the case. The saint candidates were just such an existence. Their existence was necessary for the sake of Eurus, the church and the world. It was only natural that the mission of a saint was more important than any individual saint's personality or emotions. Eurus couldn't even save a single woman who was festering in agony. How can a person from such a country as Eurus become a hero to save the world? Christina scoffed bitterly. Unable to say anything more, Arius closed his eyes. Bashara shed tears as he recited a prayer over and over again. What shall we do? Arius finally spoke up at the end of a long silence. What do you want from us? Please don't get involved, Christina replied. Please don't hold Sir Eugene accountable for any of this. Please don't commit any more transgressions. Please don't repeat any of your sins. And for the saints who have been sacrificed so far as well as the candidates who weren't able to become saints, please erect a memorial in remembrance of them. Arius silently accepted these requests. There will be no more need for saints in the ages to come, Christina promised. So please don't try to make any more saints. If you still have some of the relics stored away, please return them to where they need to go. Please don't openly acknowledge me as the saint. You don't have the right to give such an acknowledgement. Our faith, Arius brought up hesitantly. Christina instructed, just serve the light with pure intentions. Be thankful for the light that exists everywhere in this world. Yes, Arius looked up at the light with blank eyes. I promise I will. Now everything was over. Christina tried to withdraw as she felt a slight dizziness. However, at that moment, a niece spoke inside Christina's head. Christina, May I borrow your body for a few moments? Sister, is there anything else you would like me to tell them? This is my own personal business. It won't take long, so please allow me to use your body for a little while. Ah, all right, I understand. I trust you wouldn't really do so, but please don't do anything with my body that I would be ashamed of. While feeling uneasy, Christina focused on Anis's soul. Then a conversion took place. Anis was aware, as someone who had already died, it would be unacceptable for her to steal or monopolize Christina's body for herself. However, there were moments when she couldn't help but do so. Now was one such moment for Anis. Bam! A sound heavier than the slap from earlier shook the audience chamber. It was only natural. Anis didn't slap him like Christina had, but instead smashed Aurius' nose with a tightly clenched fist. Gag. Who could have imagined that a fist would be sent flying into his face in such an atmosphere? Aurius tumbled backward in his chair. Open the door to the special artifact vault, Anis ordered. Aurius stammered painfully. No, is there even any need for me to tell you to open the door? I'll open the door myself, so just hand me the key. As she said this, Anis grabbed Aurius' right hand and pulled off the platinum ring from his index finger. Even though she had told him to hand it over, she just took it herself. After all, even though you've said all this, isn't it possible for you lot to go back on your words behind the scenes? Anis muttered to herself. So, I'll go to the special artifact vault and check the remaining relics. By seeing it with my own eyes, I'll be able to judge what things shouldn't be allowed to exist and take care of them with the sacred rites. Ununderstood, Aurius stammered once more. While the demand was excessive, Aurius couldn't put up any resistance to her words. For some reason, the nature of the light surrounding Christina seemed to have changed, and it was impossible to even think of refusing, especially when he was being confronted with those eyes. I'll also take out any items I need to carry from the special artifacts vault, so just overlook them if they're missing. Yes. Upon hearing this timid reply, Anis smiled contentedly. She massaged her aching wrist and turned, meeting Eugene's gaze, who was standing beside her with a dazed expression. What are you looking at? Anis asked cheekily. Oh, that's right, it is you, Eugene nodded. Let's go, Anis said as she spread her wings and glided down from the raised dais. Raphael, who had returned the greatsword to his back, bowed his head to Anis even as he inwardly tilted his head in confusion at the strange sense of incongruity and charisma coming from Christina. Before they left the audience chamber, Bashara, who had been praying for quite some time, sobbed and called out to Anis, Lady Saint. What is it? Anis curtly responded. Can we really go to heaven? Is heaven truly real? Bashara pleaded. At this question, Anis snorted and tucked her wings back in. Heaven exists, but you need to do a lot of good deeds to get in there. Bashara gasped. You know what that means, right? Just because you're a pope or a cardinal doesn't mean you necessarily get to go to heaven. As Anis said this, she opened the closed doors to the audience chamber. If you want to go to heaven, go and do good deeds. Chapter 202, The Audience Chamber 3. Getting used to switching between different consciousnesses was easier said than done. While feeling a slight dizziness, Christina shook her head. Are you really all right with this, Lord Raphael? Christina asked as she stared at the back of Raphael, who had taken the lead to guide them to the special relics vault as if it was only natural for him to do so. There wasn't a single drop of blood still visible on the great sword slung across his back. Christina could still vividly recall how that viciously sharp blade had just decapitated Cardinal Pietro. What do you mean by that? Raphael asked in a tone that seemed genuinely confused. Christina softly cleared her throat and tacked on an explanation. Lord Raphael, no matter how things have turned out, there's still the matter of you killing Cardinal Pietro with your sword, right? While I got the Vatican's agreement to cooperate regarding the matter with Sir Eugene and me, but as for you... There's no need for you to worry about that, Lady Saint, Raphael assured her, no longer addressing Christina by the title Saint candidate. Raphael had seen her spread 8 wings right in front of him, and he had also seen her send her fist flying into the side of the Pope's head. So while it couldn't be helped that Christina didn't really like that, Raphael honestly couldn't think of a title that was acceptable to call her other than Saint. Raphael explained, if they dismiss me now, the Knights of the Blood Cross don't currently have any talents who could replace me. Especially if they listen to the Saintess scolding immediately, they're sure to lose a lot of holy relics and related miracles. Yura's power will have diminished quite a bit by the time they're done with that. Well, it can't be helped, Christina hummed in understanding. As such, that's even more reason why the Pope can't afford to officially discipline me. At the moment, knights from every country are preparing to gather at the night march that's scheduled for next year. But if I were to be dismissed or have to go into seclusion due to a sudden illness or any other unavoidable circumstances, who in the world would be left to lead the Knights of the Blood Cross to make a name for Yuras in the Night March? The Night March was the unity conference the Emperor of Kiel had organized to bring the various knightly orders together. The stated purpose was to bring together the mightiest in each country, giving them a stage to compare themselves and promoting camaraderie. But the true intention was to respond to the warning given by the Demon King of Incarceration and the Demon Folk of Helmuth, the warning intended for the whole world. Even if it didn't serve as much of a message as the Emperor intended, by gathering the strongest from each country, the Unity Conference or the Night March would serve as a large show of force. This peaceful era without any wars had lasted for a long time now. Many knights were considered to be among the best of the best, but who exactly was the best and the strongest had yet to be decided. It wasn't just the hot-blooded younger knights who were excited. Most knights also felt a fire light up inside them at the thought of a place where they could draw their swords, swing them around and compare against each other. This would be a ranking contest between the different countries, between the different knightly orders. Underneath the surface, headhunting should already be taking place. Since it was only obvious that such things would take place, Yuras wouldn't just throw away their crusader, the greatest knight in the Holy Empire. I've heard that the location of the Night March has yet to be decided, but have you heard anything new, Lord Raphael? Eugene asked. Isn't it only natural that the Emperor of Kiel wants to hold the Night March within his country? The same goes for Yuras as well. Raphael shrugged his shoulders with a smile. However, it's almost certain that the event will be set in Roer. That is why the Pope wanted to set the Beast King back, even if it meant using despicable tricks. The Vatican's Special Relics Vault was also located in the basement of the White Palace, just like the audience chamber. Bishops and archbishops were allowed to enter the other relic vaults as long as they had permission, but only the Pope and the cardinals from successive generations were allowed to enter the Special Relics Vault. They arrived in front of the strictly guarded Special Relics Vault, but there was no one there to keep them from entering. The paladins responsible for guarding this floor had already bowed their heads and backed away on their own before Raphael could even say anything. Telepathy was one of the highest-leveled spells in divine magic. Even if his stigmata was artificially implanted, the Pope's holy power was indisputably unrivaled, so he must have telepathically sent an order to all of the paladins guarding the White Palace. "Allow me to leave you here," Raphael said as his steps came to a halt. "While I'm also curious about what is contained within the Special Relics Vault, it's still not appropriate for me to accompany you inside and see it myself. I shall bid you farewell and return to the Knights of the Blood Cross." "Thank you for accompanying us," Christina said with a quick prayer of thanks, only for Raphael to laugh and get down on one knee. "It was an honor to be able to participate in this historic event with you, Lady Saint. Please, I will pray that the light will shine down upon all of the saints' endeavors." With these final words, Raphael turned around and left. They proceeded down an empty hallway at the end of which stood a circular white door. Christina moved towards the door, rubbing the platinum ring that she now wore on her finger. A complex gap spread across the door as she held the ring up. Then the gap split open soundlessly, forming a path wide enough for people to pass through. This was a high-level application of security magic, comparable to the Lionheart clan's treasure vault. Eugene followed Christina into the Special Relics Vault. "So anyways, what exactly did you come here looking for?" Eugene asked as he stared at Christina's back. "We're here to check whether the remains of Sister or the other saints have been left here as holy relics," Christina replied. "Sister," Eugene repeated with a doubtful expression, only for Christina to slap a hand across her lips in alarmed surprise. Christina coughed. "Ahem. Lady Anise, you are quite mischievous. It would be nice if you could at least warn me before you borrowed my lips to speak." "I didn't do anything, so why are you trying to push the blame on me?" Anise complained. "Sister, please." "Christina. I can't help but feel very disappointed in the actions you just showed. It seems like you intend to use me as an excuse to cover up your mistakes. And you can even use me as a scapegoat when you feel the urge to satisfy your shady desires, isn't that right? Shady desires? Just what does that even? What I'm worried about is something like this. Christina, won't you be tempted to pretend to be me and kiss Hamel with your own Lee? Ahem. Cough. Ahem. Christina burst into a coughing fit, pounding on her chest as if she had got something caught in her throat. At the same time, dozens of prayers were being recited in her head all at once. Since Christina was going so far as to drown her out, Anise also backed down and stopped speaking about such things to Christina. Are you all right? Eugene asked in concern. Yes, I'm fine, Christina replied, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Although they said that the holy relics of the previous generations have already been returned to the light, if there are any other holy relics that shouldn't be here, I'll be sure to perform the sacrament to return them to the light. Also, Christina raised her head and looked around the inside of the vault. There is still the matter of Lady Anice's belongings, Christina continued. Some of them should have been stored here, so we need to retrieve them. While returning any holy remains to the light was also important, recovering Anice's belongings was her real purpose for entering the special relics vault. They weren't just any mere belongings. The belongings of the faithful Anise were, in a sense, more valuable than the remains of her or any other saint. Especially if it's you, Anise insisted. Because my belongings stored here, all saw use during my travels through the Devildom 300 years ago. Various relics were stored in the special relics vault. Or rather, they used to be stored there. Most of the glass cabinets which had once held relics inside of them were now empty. Looking at this sight, Eugene clenched his fist firmly before relaxing it. These empty glass cases reminded him of the filter he had seen at the source of the fount of light. Apart from the fact that there wasn't any water flowing here, there wasn't much difference. Originally, the holy relics of former saints must have been stored within these glass cases. As for the items that hadn't disappeared, starting from the bones, there were various other categories of items. The bones were the remains of ordinary saints rather than the saints. In addition to those, apart from the crosses, rosary beads, rosaries and other such holy items, there were several weapons such as daggers. Ho ho, Eugene let out a brief huff of admiration as he followed behind Christina. Did they also leave this here? How fortunate. Instead of being kept inside one of the ordinary glass cabinets, the item that Eugene had noticed was erected on a pillar made out of gold. Although it looked well worn, the mace was subtly stained with a black and reddish hue. While Anise was making good use of this weapon 300 years ago, this vicious weapon had shattered the heads of countless demon folk. Christina hesitated. I don't have the confidence to wield a mace as well as Lady Anise, but if you remove the head and connect it to the handle with a chain, you can use it as a flail, Anise advised. Christina's hand reached out as if possessed and lifted the mace. It was heavy. Christina had also learned how to wield a flail from a young age and had confidence in her strength, but Anise's mace was too heavy for her to hold with one hand. If it wasn't this heavy, then it wouldn't even be able to break a demon folk's head, Anise said. This artifact was prepared for me when I was still a child, and it was made by carving the whole thing out of a solid block of expensive adamantium. It accompanied me into the fount of light from the very beginning, and it was smelted using my sacred blood and the light from the fount. Christina listened silently. Not only that, I learned how to steadily infuse it with my sacred blood even when I wasn't paying attention to it, and I used it as a catalyst for my miracles. In Helmuth, it drank the blood of countless demon folk and reaped their souls, all while being baptized and purified with my sacred blood and the light every day. I dare say that, in this era, this mace is probably the second best weapon for killing demon folk following the holy sword. While Christina looked down at the mace she was holding, she felt her heart pound. Knowing the true origins of it only made the mace feel even heavier to her. Just as Anise had said, this mace must definitely be the second most lethal sacred artifact for dealing with demon folk, following the holy sword Altair. Just seeing that makes my side ache for no reason, Eugene grumbled. Huh? Christina questioned in surprise. When was it again? Eugene muttered to himself. We weren't able to restock, so we had run out of liquor, but Anise had stocked up a few bottles from her own quota. So Sienna and I tried to steal some alcohol without Anise knowing about it. We got caught midway through. Sienna cowardly ran away by herself using space magic, and I was the only one to have my ribs shattered by Anis's mace. While recalling their distant past, Eugene brushed his own side and continued, "No matter how I think about it, Anis definitely went too far at that time. Those shattered ribs tore through my lungs so I couldn't breathe and the pain was truly agonizing. Then instead of treating me, Anis even broke my leg. How could they steal from their own comrade? It was that son of a bitch Hamel's fault for doing so," Anis cursed. "Sir Eugene, you were the one in the wrong," Christina dutifully parroted. Eugene retorted, "Who said that I wasn't in the wrong? I just said she went too far with the punishment, teeth." Eugene was also very familiar with the next sacred item. It was the rosary that Anis had worn the whole time they were on their travels. Just holding it in your hand accelerates the recovery of divine power, and it can amplify the power of miracles. There was also a glass bottle containing real holy water instead of alcohol. Just like the mace, by entering the fount of light with me ever since I was a child, it is a sacred item that has been imbued with its own blessings. Without any cumbersome rituals or chores, you can make holy water just by putting ordinary water inside it. The holy water created by doing so can dissolve demonic power and even burn the blood and flesh of the demon folk. If an additional miracle is cast upon it, it can even be used as a potion that, while not as good as an elixir, still has an excellent effect. Christina hung the rosary on her neck and placed the glass bottle in a pocket. Then she picked up the mace with both hands and headed towards the final relic. It was a pure white robe with a red cross sewn onto it. Seeing this robe, Eugene smiled unconsciously. In Eugene's memories, Anis was always wearing that robe. The red cross on her back and the white lining had never once been splattered with blood, but beneath that robe, Anis's back had always been covered with blood. "Taking that with you will be very convenient," Anis said. "During the many years I spent drifting around Helmuth, that robe has never once gotten dirty. It also has never had blood stained on it. The cross is always a clear red, and the white background was made to represent purity without any blemishes. It's quite an ostentatious symbol of the saint." "Will that really fit me?" Christina thought uncertainly. "It fit me, so of course it will fit you too. The robe itself can amplify miracles, and I also don't want to leave even a single piece of my belongings here. So Christina, go ahead and take all of them for yourself." Christina hesitantly wrapped the robe around her body. It was definitely her first time wearing it, but as the robe wrapped snugly around her body, she felt a comfortable sensation as if she had worn it for a long time. "Don't pay too much attention to me," Anis warned. Christina was currently wearing Anis's robe with Anis's rosary around her neck, Anis's holy water bottle in one pocket, and she was even carrying Anis's mace. "You can't let yourself become me. All of these are just to help you on your journey. They're not meant to transform yourself into me." Without replying, Christina reached up and rubbed the rosary. There was no need for her to even respond to these words. As she felt Anis's care for her, Christina smiled faintly. She wasn't weak enough to feel confused about her identity just because of a slight change in the way she dressed. She was Christina Rodriguez. And the person who had first called her by that name was standing right in front of her. "Sir Eugene," Christina spoke up. "Would you please return ahead of me?" "Where should I go?" Eugene asked without any embarrassment at the request. Christina hid the heavy mace inside her robe and laughed. "It doesn't matter which one, but please stay in one of Eurasia's inns for now." "What are you going to do?" Eugene asked. There's a little something I still have to do." As Christina looked around the special relics vault, she continued, "Among all the holy relics stored here, none seem to require a special sacrament to be returned to the light. In the end, there are just a few holy remains stored here because of the miracles contained within them, instead of for other purposes." Eugene nodded. "I see. However, there are still a few other places that I want to check out. There are probably a lot more of the relics that we're concerned about stored within the Inquisition headquarters or the Department of Divine Magic," Christina concluded. The Inquisition and the Department of Divine Magic were where the research on black magic and ancient magic, such as blood magic, had taken place. "Got it," Eugene acquiesced. It wasn't too hard for Eugene to offer some more help. However, Eugene didn't say something like that, because Christina hadn't asked for his help. It wasn't like she was holding herself back from saying something, so this meant that Christina clearly didn't want Eugene's help. She wanted to finish everything related to the saints with her own hands and send her condolences to them along with any of their remains. 2 days later, there will be an event to celebrate Lady Anice's birthday at the Plaza of the Sun. Trying to keep her voice from shaking, Christina continued, "Let's meet there at noon when the sun is at its highest." Chapter 203, The Plaza of the Sun 1. It was now 2 days after Eugene had left the Vatican. Although Pope Aerius and Cardinal Bashara had begged him to stay in the Vatican, Eugene had no intention or desire to do so. As such, Eugene had reserved a room in a luxury inn near the Plaza of the Sun. In this season, with Anice's birthday drawing nearer, no matter how much money one had or how high one or their family's status was, finding a vacant room was difficult. However, if the Holy See were to personally request a room, it was only natural that the owner of the accommodations would be willing to offer it up to them. Eugene had locked himself up in his luxurious lodgings for the past 2 days. In any case, he didn't have anything that required him to go out, nor did he want to do so. Mare secretly wished to tour the city, but as soon as they entered their quarters, she saw Eugene sitting down in the middle of the living room as if it was the most natural thing for him to do, so she gave up her faint expectations. For the past 2 days, Eugene operated the Lionheart clan's white flame formula and watched as the number of stars increased to 6. With each circulation of the white flame formula, the 6 stars slowly revolved around his heart. When there were only 5 stars, they hadn't exhibited any signs of rotation around the core. So had the operating methods of the white flame formula changed just because of the addition of one more core? That was what Eugene had suspected at first. But as a result of having watched the rotation around his core for the past few days, Eugene had come up with a few more guesses. Could it be that it changed by itself to better suit me? Although the idea seemed absurd, Eugene couldn't think of any other reason apart from that. Currently, Eugene's 6 stars were spinning as if he had released the ring flame formula, even though he hadn't started operating the ring flame formula. That said, it didn't mean that Eugene wouldn't be able to use the ring flame formula if it came down to it. The moment Eugene focused on it, the slow rotation of his cores became quicker and more violent. The ring flame formula that was instantaneously activated when this happened generated a much higher output of mana that couldn't be compared to when he only had 5 stars. The lightning flames were also perfectly melted into this torrent of mana, and even though they hadn't been easy to handle when he only had 5 stars, the lightning flames could now be handled as smoothly as if it was just ordinary mana. The fact that there's no need to switch from the white flame formula to the ring flame formula means that the warming up process has disappeared. As a result, the output and the limits of the cores have also increased. If he had to put it simply, the 6-star white flame formula had cores that kept rotating even if Eugene didn't bother to operate the formula, so Eugene would be able to emit a high output of mana the moment he desired it. Also, thanks to its continuous rotation, his mana capacity was constantly growing. And what did this growth in his mana mean? It meant that his base output was also steadily increasing. High output of mana, no matter how much of it was used to strengthen the body, would inevitably burden the body. In order to keep up with this burden, Eugene wasn't able to neglect the training of his body. The recoil from using ignition was the body breaking down because it couldn't endure the heightened output of mana. Even if it wasn't as much as ignition, as long as one pushed their mana to its limit, their body would be damaged by it. However, there existed a line at which the body would no longer be damaged by its own strength. The moment the body was completely united with its mana, it could be reconstructed using mana even without using magic. Rather than a simple rejuvenation, this was closer to metamorphosis, and the reconstructed body would become strong enough not to be damaged by its own mana output. Except for cases like ignition, that is. Although I never thought I'd be able to reach that line so quickly, Eugene thought as he clenched and unclenched his fist. This 20-year-old body was in such mint condition that it didn't really need any reconstruction. However, it was a gratifying and pleasant surprise to be able to withstand the burden of his increased mana output. That said, I still can't withstand the recoil of ignition, but I wasn't really expecting to anyway. If I use a 6-star ignition with the empty sword on top of that, Eugene trailed off consideringly as he pictured what he could do at his maximum current limit. When he had previously stacked 2 layers of the empty sword on top of his 5-star white flame formula, the maximum output he had been able to produce momentarily had barely approached what Hamel had achieved in his heyday during his previous life. When Eugene had killed Sergio, he had used ignition with a 6-star white flame formula, and he had been able to make 3 stacks of the empty sword. The slash he had produced at that moment was about the same as when he used ignition during the peak of his previous life. Ignition with the 6-star white flame formula is even stronger than my previous life. If I can stack the empty sword to its maximum limit, it should also be similar in strength to my peak ignition. As expected, the problem still lies in endurance, Eugene thought regretfully. Ignition just came with too much of a burden. On top of that, even if it was Eugene, his current limit with the empty sword was 3 stacks, and it was close to impossible for him to be able to sustain those stacks for a lengthy time. Eugene reminded himself, I don't really have to use the empty sword. Since I also have the moonlight sword, if I use ignition to support the drain of the moonlight sword, would he be able to beat the Demon King of Incarceration? No, even Eugene wasn't that arrogant. On the contrary, he was realistic and pessimistic enough that he was able to take a good critical look at himself when it came to matters like this. Even if Eugene used everything he had available to him and pushed himself to his limit, it was likely that the Demon King of Incarceration would still be able to make him disappear with a mere flick of his finger. He had never personally fought with the Demon King of Incarceration, so it was difficult to imagine how their conflict might play out, but that was the probable outcome. I wouldn't be able to match nor Giabella or Gavid Lindman either. Still, I should be able to somehow keep up against Iris, right? If I used the moonlight sword from the beginning. Eugene considered it for a moment before shaking his head. No, that won't work. Just like me, the moonlight sword isn't in perfect condition either, so its light could go out in the middle of a battle. Instead, it would be better for me to keep it hidden throughout the battle, than at the critical moment. Sir Eugene, a voice called out to him. Ignoring the interruption, Eugene continued thinking, just what is going on with the white flame formula? Does it usually transform like this once you've reached the 6th star? But it didn't seem like rising to the 6th star should have anything to do with the cores beginning to rotate. What if, as Eugene had already guessed, the white flame formula really had modified itself to better suit him? Eugene recalled all those in the Lionheart clan who had reached the 6th star of the white flame formula. With Doin's Lionheart dead, there were currently only 3 people in the Lionheart clan who had overcome the hurdle into the 6th star of the white flame formula. The Patriarch Gilead, the captain of the 5th Division of the Black Lion Knights, Guion, and the captain of the 3rd Division of the Black Lion Knights, Carmen. Among these 3, Carmen's white flame formula had even reached the 7th star, becoming one of the few in the history of the Lionheart clan to have been able to leap over that infamously devilish hurdle. Eugene added another reminder, when I return to the Lionheart clan this time, I have to make sure to ask. A voice shouted, Sir Eugene. Eugene's thoughts halted. Mare had jumped out of his cloak and grabbed Eugene by the collar. Eugene blinked his eyes, stunned by her sudden fiery outburst. Do you know just how many times I've called you? Mare demanded. I almost thought you were Sienna, Eugene mumbled to himself as he shook his head and pulled himself free of Mare's grasp on his collar. Eugene had gotten too lost in his thoughts. A moment ago, when Mare, who looked just like Sienna, had shoved her face into his and grabbed his collar like Sienna always used to, Eugene's thoughts had frozen for a moment. Him, Mare smiled proudly and poked Eugene's chest a few times with her elbow upon hearing Eugene's mutter. I was going to get angry with you, but I'll forgive you for now. Sir Eugene, it looks like you were so busy thinking of Lady Sienna that you actually got confused when you saw me, right? No, well, that's right, Eugene gave in. Even so, Sir Eugene, please keep in mind that I am not Lady Sienna. In the end, I'm Lady Sienna's doll. Mare caught herself. No, wait, I meant familiar. Eugene nodded. Fine. However, even if I don't get angry at you, I still have to say something. Do you know why? The reason for my shouting is not that you have been ignoring my calls. It's because you are acting like a dandy, Sir Eugene, Mare complained. These words only made Eugene even more confused at her interruption. Did she really just say that he was acting like a dandy? What kind of bullshit nonsense was that? Mare protested. Did you really need to wash your hair and take a bath before heading there? Eugene argued back. So what, I shouldn't wash up if I'm heading out? But you even brushed your teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, you'll have bad breath. What does that matter? You just have to ensure that her face doesn't get close enough for her to smell your bad breath. No way, Sir Eugene, did you actually brush your teeth just in case your lips get close to hers? Mare demanded. Eugene sighed. Just what are you even saying? You also changed your clothes, Mare pointed out. Why did you have to change? You could have just worn the clothes that you wore the day before. Or else, you could wear the clothes I picked out for you. You seem to have mistaken my gender when you picked those out, Eugene complained. When did I do that? Of course, Sir Eugene, you are a man. Just how could I be mistaken about something like that? Mare replied while tilting her head to the side. In response, Eugene just furrowed his brows and flicked Mare on the forehead with his fingertips. Eugene turned the questions back onto Mare. Then why the fuck did you pick out a skirt for me, especially a skirt that's such a gaudy red? And where did you even get those tacky fishnet stockings from? Those were a gift from Melkith, Mare explained. She told me I might want to wear them someday when I become an impressive lady. Should I just kill her? Eugene mumbled. Tempest agreed immediately. I think it might be necessary. That's not important. What's truly important is that, Sir Eugene, you have dressed up all fancy for your date with that dual personality saint, Mare accused. Eugene sighed once more. Just why do you keep saying such nonsense? Who the hell said that it was a date? You're not seriously saying that, are you? Mare asked skeptically. All right, it is a date, Eugene conceded. I admit it. However, I didn't particularly try to dress up for it. I just washed myself up since I was heading out and made sure to change my clothes while I was at it. Does it look like I put something in my hair or sprayed on any perfume? Or else, am I wearing anything fancy or expensive? Sir Eugene, you have good proportions, so along with that face, you look great no matter what you wear, Mare pouted. Eugene hesitated in embarrassment. Thanks for the compliment, but in any case I've never especially dressed up for. That's why it's even more of a problem. Even though you haven't done anything particular to dress up, you look like you have. What should we do if that insidious saintess forms a strange misunderstanding after seeing your current appearance? Lady Sienna, what should I do? Mare called out in a panic. What kind of misunderstanding are you talking about? Fortunately, Eugene didn't have to keep responding to Mare's whining. The voice coming from behind him felt like salvation to Eugene. With a grateful sigh, he turned around to look behind him. He saw Christina standing there wearing a white robe. It was Anissa's robe that they had retrieved from the Vatican's special relics vault. Christina pulled the hood of her robe down over her face as she looked at Eugene and Mare. Ugh, Mare couldn't help but feel slightly intimidated by Christina's appearance. Please close your eyes. Mare could still clearly recall that voice and her blue eyes. Have I kept you waiting for long? No, not really. It was almost noon in the Plaza of the Sun. Right when they had promised to meet after parting ways a few days ago. There was still a little bit of time left before it fully turned noon, but the sun that was already high in the sky was warm and bright. Beneath the vibrant sun, the statue of Anise appeared to be flying with its wings spread wide open. Today was the 13th of April, Anise's birthday. Yura's list of saints, saintesses and anniversaries was as long as its storied history. Still, the festival of Anise's birthday was celebrated just as grandly as the anniversary of the empire's founding or any of the other festivals dedicated to things like the harvest that were celebrated in Eurus. Although celebrations for the festival were taking place all over Eurus, the most crowded location was the capital, Eurasia. During the week-long festival that started from this day, the Sunnyside Anise train would be free to ride until late into the night, and any city carriage fees as well as the prices of restaurants and most of the stores in the city would be tax and tithe-free. On top of that, a parade would begin to march the streets of the city, and fireworks would be set off at night. The center of the festival was right here in the Plaza of the Sun. Even now, the plaza was full of people waving their hands up towards the statue of Anise that was floating in the sky and offering up their prayers. However, even though there were so many people, the space around Eugene was quite vacant. Also, no one else in the plaza seemed to dare to draw closer to Eugene. This was because of the mana that Eugene intentionally allowed to leak as well as a complex suggestion spell. As such, while most of the people there recognized Eugene, none of them had attempted to approach him. Ahem, Christina quietly cleared her throat and lifted her head. The icon of Anise was symbolic of the Plaza of the Sun. It was considered one of the best among the various statues, ruins and religious iconography that could be found throughout Eurus. In the past, whenever she saw the statue, Christina would also feel her emotions stir deep within her heart and get the urge to offer up a prayer. They screwed up their historical research. There's no way that my wings were so shabby. Also, they made the face of my statue too benevolent and caring, like a mother who's given birth to a child, but my actual face had a slightly sharper feeling to it. From now on, Christina wouldn't be able to feel the same heightened emotions she had in the past. While ignoring a niece grumbling away inside of her head, Christina reached into her cloak. Her eyes were focused on Mare, who was clinging to Eugene's chest like a cicada. "Lady Mare," Christina called out to her. Mare stammered, "W, is it?" As she was replying, Mare grew so nervous that she couldn't help but lower her gaze. How humiliating. While recalling Sienna, who Mare had last seen so long ago, the corners of her mouth drooped down. Mare had never missed Sienna, her master and creator, as much as she did now. Christina continued in a friendly tone, "Do you know? This square is huge." "I guess so," Mare reluctantly mumbled. "Once you exit this plaza, the surrounding squares and streets are all called the gourmet streets," Christina informed her. Mare's eyes shook. Being able to survive the strict management and all of the competition, the delicacies found in the gourmet streets are so delicious that it's hard to believe they're just food stalls. Especially during a festival like this, when both local and foreign businesses are allowed to open stalls as long as they apply for a permit in advance. "Do you get what I'm trying to say?" Christina asked. I don't know," Mare resolutely shook her head. "This is a chance to enjoy flavors from all across the continent," Christina explained as she pulled out a wooden rosary that could be worn on the wrist from inside her pocket. This rosary is only issued to high-ranking priests above the rank of a bishop. In a place like Eura's, the welfare shown to priests is quite exceptional. Especially in Eurasia, where you can receive the best service provided in any store just by wearing this bracelet on your wrist. Mare silently stared at the rosary. "That goes for the stalls as well," Christina added. "No matter how long the lines are, if you show them this bracelet, you can place the next order immediately without having to line up. And of course, with this bracelet you won't need to pay for it." Mare's eyes wavered in temptation. Christina continued to tempt her. "It's not just the stalls. You can use this bracelet in any of the restaurants or stores. While ordinary people would have a hard time even getting into just 10 of the stores during this whole week-long festival with this bracelet, if you wear it you can partake in all of the stalls and shops in just half a day, assuming that your stomach allows for it." As long as her stomach allows for it? Mare didn't even have a stomach to ask for its permission. These festival street stalls, could they really be as exciting as Christina was making them sound? However, it's a pity, Christina sighed. "Even though I'll be staying in the plaza all day because I don't have any appetite, I won't be able to visit any of the street stalls or restaurants." Mare stammered in outrage. "It's..." Christina reeled her in. "But Lady Mare, if you really wish, I can lend you this rosary just for today, but..." At these words, Mare couldn't help but fall into a long silence as she pondered her choice. Even as Mare kept her mouth shut, she could feel that time continued to pass. Dong dong dong. From a clock tower nearby, Mare heard the sound of a bell tolling noon. "Oh!" Gasps erupted from the crowd as a gimmick that was built into Anissa's statue and only revealed at noon on holidays was activated. A sophisticated mechanical device that borrowed the power of Magitech sprung into motion and changed the posture of the statue. Anissa's statue, which had been flying in the sky while looking down at the ground, knelt down while still floating in the air and took on a praying posture. After that, her outspread wings flapped once and feathers of light were scattered into the sky. Mare silently gazed up at this scene. The sunlight hit the wings of the statue at just the right time, creating a dazzling array of beautiful colors. At this sight, Mare put her hands together and offered up a prayer. "I'm sorry, Lady Sienna. Shouldn't it be okay if it was just a day or so? Since this was also the birthday of her comrade from 300 years ago, and if it was to commemorate her." In no way was Mare being blinded by the allure of the festival stalls. Come to think of it, she had promised Ancilla and Gerhard that she would buy souvenirs for them before she returned from Eura's. Since she had received such love and care from them thus far, Mare felt she should at least buy them some souvenirs. Mare thought to herself, "There's no way Sir Eugene will take the time to go and buy souvenirs. So apart from today, there won't be any better opportunity for me to buy some." As such, Mare decided that it couldn't be helped. "Lady Sienna did tell me that if someone did me a favor I should always repay it," Mare convinced herself. In other words, this wasn't Mare succumbing to the temptation of food, but instead just practicing Lady Sienna's teachings. She might get something to eat if she got hungry along the way, but her primary purpose today was to go and buy souvenirs. Mare calmly let go of Eugene's chest and walked out of the cloak. No further conversation was necessary. Christina tied the rosary bracelet around Mare's wrist with a benevolent smile. Once she received this bracelet, Mare slowly turned to leave. Mare shot a glance at Eugene. She took a step forward, then stopped and looked back. "Can I just ask you something?" Mare requested. Christina agreed. "Yes, whatever you like." "Right now, are you Lady Christina or Lady Anise?" Mare asked hesitantly. At these words, Christina just smiled and tilted her head to the side. "Which one could it be?" Christina teased. Mare didn't really want to think up a reply to this question. However, if possible, she hoped that this was currently Anise. If that was the case, then it meant this really couldn't be helped. After Mare bowed her head, she turned around once more. Eugene finally spoke up. "Be careful. Don't follow any strange people, and even if they tell you they're going to give you candy, just ignore them." Instead of replying, Mare just raised a fist with the rosary dangling from it to remind Eugene. "Let's go as well," Christina said as she walked over, pulling her hood down over her face a little more securely. The plaza today was the most crowded that it would be all year, and Anise's statue was right above them. As such, Christina didn't dare to reveal her face, which so closely resembled Anise's. "But where are we going?" Eugene asked. "I haven't quite decided that yet, but since I finally have the opportunity to come out like this, wouldn't it be fun to just stroll around the festival together?" Christina replied as she took the lead and walked forward for a few steps. Then she suddenly recalled something and turned to look at Eugene. "Hamel, do you recognize who I am?" Eugene snorted. "Have you decided that you're going to call me Hamel as well?" Christina just blinked for a few moments at this question before breaking into a smile. "I thought that my acting was pretty good, but it seems that I failed to act like Lady Anise," Christina said with some relief. "Do you really need to keep acting?" Eugene muttered as he lifted a finger. He knew why Christina was wearing a hood. He could also understand her reasons for doing so. However, Eugene didn't really like the fact that she was. A gentle breeze blew Christina's hood back. Christina was startled and tried to grab her hood, but the cheeky breeze kept forcing her hood back even as her hair was sent flying. "Christina Rogerus," Eugene addressed her by her full name. "Since you're not guilty of any crime, why do you keep hiding your face?" "But someone might recognize me," Christina weakly protested. "So what? Do you think that something troublesome will occur if someone does recognize you?" "It might. But you still shouldn't hide your face. You are you and Anise is Anise. If someone sees your face and tries to act all pushy, I'll tell them to get lost," Eugene grumbled in promise as he walked past Christina. "It's almost noon and I'm feeling hungry, so I'd like to get something to eat. But is that still possible? You gave your bracelet to Mare after all." Christina, who had been just standing there blankly, let out a short laugh and walked over to Eugene. "I have more than one rosary, so please don't worry about it." Having her face exposed felt unfamiliar to her for some reason. Christina needlessly rubbed her own cheeks as she followed behind Eugene. "Christina," Anise called out to her. "Yes, sister," Christina meekly responded. "Do you understand my feelings now?" Anise whispered fondly. "I really liked how